G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got another NFL division prediction video for you. Obviously we're talking about the NFC East today, which is the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Commanders and the Giants. So upon first viewing, it's a very strong division, I think, just like it has been in the past. Last season, obviously 3 of the teams made the playoffs, and I think that could be happening again here because the NFC East as a whole compared to the AFC, the NFC compared to the AFC as a whole, I think is a lot weaker, and so that could bring about the opportunity for 3 teams here again to make the playoffs. But we'll dive into that, each team, what I think my thoughts are in terms of the end record for each team, who's winning this division, key players, all that. So if you haven't checked out the last couple that I've done the NFC West and the AFC East so far. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments, but without further ado, let's get into it. So I think to no one's surprise, I've got the Washington Commanders finishing dead last in this division. And it's a tough one to not put them any higher because of the strength of the other teams in this division. Having said that, I do like some of the players, and I do like especially the defensive line. You know, Jonathan Allen, Chase Young coming back from injury, Montez Sweat, and Deron Payne. That's potentially on paper the best defensive line in the NFL. But it's unfortunate for them because years gone by, and I think this year will be similar, even with that unbelievable D-line. It's just other parts to this roster that have just not been up to standard, you know, particularly the defensive backs. And then when you flip it to offense, outside of Terry McLaurin, they haven't really had anyone sort of hit as a consistent offensive piece. I do like Jahan Dotson. He had a very nice rookie campaign. Curtis Samuel's there as well. But outside of that, and then obviously the quarterback situation, we can't not mention that. Sam Howell is, I think he's been named, or he's probably going to be named as the week 1 starter for Washington, which for me is more than fine. You've got to see what you've got with him. I think a lot of people probably asking for Jacoby Brissett. I don't really see the value in doing that because, you know, player profile, obviously you know what you're getting with Jacoby Brissett, but you don't know how good Sam Howell could potentially be. So there could be something to be had there with the new quarterback, the young quarterback. Even with a small sample size, we obviously don't know a hell of a lot what we're going to get in the NFL from Sam Howell, but potentially could be an amazing pickup. And so onto key players, I've already mentioned a few of them. In terms of the offense, Jahan Dotson, I think, was quite underrated last season. As a rookie, a lot of other rookie wide receivers got a lot more attention. The likes of Christian Watson, obviously having a unbelievable sort of second half of the season, even George Pickens to an extent, and then the obvious ones, Olave, Garrett Wilson, these types. But Jahan Dotson, I think, if it wasn't for playing on such a average team, I think he would have gotten a lot more plaudits. I think he also did have a period where he was out injured, but that sort of start of the season in particular, he provided real strength and versatility for this Washington offense. So going into year 2, I think he can improve upon that even more so. But you know, you got to go back to that quarterback situation. It's very dependent in terms of what Jahan Dotson can do and what Sam Howell is capable of. And then I go back to this defensive line, potentially being the best in the NFL on paper at least, but it's a different story when you get into the games, what they can produce out on the field. And so if they can actually make that a sort of, you know, known statement that this is the best defensive line in the NFL, and make it so hard for teams to play against defensively and sort of grind out games that way, this could be maybe an avenue that they finally take to make it to the playoffs and maybe be a surprise package this season. But obviously I've got them finishing last, so I don't think that's going to happen, but it could. And so in terms of the prediction, my record for them, I honestly don't see them getting more than 6 wins. A lot of that has to do with the strength of this division. I don't see them getting many wins in division, so 6 wins total for this Washington Commanders team this season. And in 3rd place, I do have the Giants again, just like last season. Having said that though, I did mention at the beginning of the video, this is a division that could have 3 teams, including the Giants, the Cowboys, and the Eagles, all make the playoffs again. I think it might be a little bit more difficult than last season, given the strength of maybe a Detroit Lions coming up and making the playoffs this season, but it definitely could happen again, because ultimately I do think, just generally speaking, the Giants got better. The big acquisition is Darren Waller at tight end, and I think he's going to be a phenomenal player for them. The question mark around him is fitness. So as long as he's on the field, I think he'll be a phenomenal player. Could easily potentially be the #1 guy for them in terms of receptions, yards, because in terms of the true receivers that they haven't really had a standout player they can hang their hat on. They got a nice crop of sort of young blokes. Wandale Robinson coming back from injury. There's a lot of sort of excitement about him, but also question marks given that big ACL injury that he had. And then other players, the likes of Darius Slayton sort of coming on, and Isaiah Hodgins, formerly of the Bills, was a nice piece for last season, but Darren Waller's the main man in terms of the receiving. And then we've got to talk about the quarterback, of course, because it's the most important position on the field, and arguably in sports, according to some. But Daniel Jones, I think, is in very good place to have a great season, and potentially, you know, I've got them finishing third, but potentially maybe finish second or even win this division. You never know. And given, I think, the strength around him getting better in terms of his options to throw to, I think that's a big reason as to why I think Daniel Jones will have a better season. And then on the flip side, you've got his running game that is probably one of the most underrated running quarterbacks in the league. You know, his stats are level with the likes of the Justin Fields of the world, Jalen Hurts, in terms of, you know, running yards per game and that sort of thing. This is a guy that's very similar to them, and they're talked about as these running dynamic quarterbacks. Whereas Daniel Jones, you know, he might not look as good, because obviously the first thought is him trying to run 50 yards and falling over his own feet. But outside of that, Daniel Jones, I think, is set up for a very solid season. Then we must touch on the Saquon Barkley situation. Obviously that was a bit of a rough sort of road there for a while, but they've ultimately settled on a 1-year deal for Barkley, the star running back, and I think it's just great to get him back in the building and hopefully performing as well as he did last season, because he was phenomenal, back to his sort of best, and injury-free as well. Then on the flip side, the defense, I think that's a big part of where the Giants can improve massively. Obviously, the big name in Dexter Lawrence, he had a phenomenal season. He broke out one of the best defensive linemen in the game right now. And then it's just other areas whether or not they can improve there in terms of the defensive backs. You know, the Adoree Jacksons of the world, Darnay Holmes. These players will need to step up. They've lost Julian Love, a safety. He's now a Seahawk. But they did also pick up linebacker Bobby Okereke, which I think is a huge get. Tackling machine. He'll be flying all over the field at linebacker, and sort of underrated position in general, but look out for him next season to be a big Giants player. And so for this Giants team, what is my prediction for their record come the end of the season? I think they'll go sort of one better. They were 9-7 and 1 draw. I think they'll be 10-7 this season. So just that, getting into that double digits win category, but ultimately still in third position due to the strength of the Eagles and the Cowboys ahead of them. But I think that's a very good chance for them to make the playoffs again, even with that third place in this division. And so probably to many people's surprise, I have the Philadelphia Eagles finishing second this season. And I'll get to, you know, why that's the case in terms of the record and everything like that in a second. But firstly, I'll start by saying I don't necessarily think the Philadelphia Eagles will be worse than the Cowboys, or even much worse than they were last season, because they had a phenomenal year, just missing out on the Super Bowl, obviously. And I don't think they'll be dropping off in the sense of performance. I just think teams around them will lift, as well as the strength of schedule. That's an important point to have. In terms of last season, it was one of the worst, I think, one of the easiest schedules, but this season they've got one of the hardest. So I think that will play a part, and, you know, prediction of maybe a few key injuries here and there. You never know what's going to happen, but I think they'll still be the best team in this division. I just don't think they'll finish first in this division. And so to sort of put more context around that, I'll jump to the prediction for both teams in terms of the Cowboys and the Eagles. I think they'll finish with the same record, 11-6 in this division, both teams. Ultimately, having the Cowboys first, it means they'll be better in division. So we'll get to the Cowboys in terms of the specifics and talk about them, but just to put more context around it, in case you're going crazy right now, seeing the Eagles in my prediction being second behind the Cowboys. I think, again, ultimately the Eagles will be a better team. I just think the Cowboys will have a better record and obviously finish on top because they had a better division record. And so key players on this Philadelphia Eagles, there's plenty of them. They're across the board, offense, defense. I could talk about just about all of them, just because of how good a lot of them were last season. And then the new ones coming in. So we'll start with the Philadelphia defense, which is basically the Georgia Bulldogs defense of the last couple of years. And in that interior, you've got Jordan Davis, you've got Jalen Carter, the two mountains, the future of this interior line. They've obviously still got Fletcher Cox, so they're going to be learning off one of the greats of recent memory. And then on the edge, Nolan Smith at linebacker, Nakobe Dean, and Keely Ringer, of course, fighting out for one of the cornerback spots. So they are set up for another very, very good campaign. Then flipping it to the offense, I think the ones to look out for is that running back room. They've got a very interesting number of players that could play a very big part, or maybe not as much as you think. And obviously just going to list them off in terms of DeAndre Swift. He's probably the biggest name acquisition, I guess. Rashad Penny is a very interesting one because of how good he is. It's just that he's not been able to stay fit for a large majority of his career. We saw very, very good games from him last season even for the Seahawks, and then obviously picked up that season-ending injury and Kenneth Walker took over there, but he could be a very, very intriguing player if he can stay fit. And then, of course, they've already got Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell, who they love. Gainwell was sort of that #1 running back come the end of the season and into playoffs. He sort of overtook Miles Sanders in the playoffs in particular. Miles Sanders obviously had a very good season holistically, but he's now gone. And then there's Trey Sermon as well. So they've got a number of players in that running back room that could play massive roles or not even feature hardly at all. And then their offensive line is probably, in my eyes, the best in the NFL. It's so balanced. Jordan Mailata, Jason Kelsey at center, and then Lane Johnson at right tackle. They've just got some of the best offensive linemen in the one room, and it will be unbelievable. I'm sort of almost convincing myself to put them first, but I think just the way it will play out, it's already obviously a more risky prediction, but that's what these predictions are all about. And so, as I mentioned, for their record, it's 11-6 for me. But now let's get on to the Cowboys. So yes, I have the Cowboys finishing first in this division, as we've already mentioned, and sort of why is that? We've talked about why it is for the Eagles, but why will the Cowboys finish top of this division? I do think the Eagles will be a better team on the whole in terms of who would you rather take, but having said that, this Cowboys team is nothing to turn your nose up at. They've also improved in a few areas that they did need to. There are some question marks, but they've got some nice pieces that they added. The one that I want to mention first is Brandon Cooks. I've got him having a massive season. He's going to be the #2 receiver behind CeeDee Lamb, so obviously CeeDee Lamb is going to be garnering a lot of attention, and rightfully so. He's a quality receiver, but Brandon Cooks coming off, some low years at Houston with subpar quarterback play. I think he's primed he could be another 1,000-yard receiver on top of CeeDee Lamb. And I think Dak Prescott is good enough to facilitate that as well. And then obviously Ezekiel Elliott is not coming back. He is now a Patriot. So Tony Pollard has got this running back room basically to himself. Obviously they will use other pieces. Deuce Vaughn is a very interesting one. We've got to talk about him. The 6th-round rookie, I believe. If it looks like a child, if you've seen the videos of him practicing with those massive helmets on, he looks like someone's kid that they brought to work, but that's beside the point, because Tony Pollard, I think as well, will be set up for another massive season, given that he's not going to have touches taken away from him from another quality back, because Ezekiel had his uses. He was obviously, that sort of third down, short yardage and close to the touchdown area type back, but now Tony Pollard is shoulders and head and shoulders above everyone else, I believe. And then this defense, led by, of course, Micah Parsons. This kid, and because he is still quite young, ultimately, not necessarily a kid, but you get what I mean. This guy is going to be nuts this season. I think he'll be easily up there for Defensive Player of the Year once again. Might even win it, and that could go a long way in terms of them finishing first, and his production. He could ultimately win the Defensive Player of the Year. He's that good. He flies around the field. We all know what he's like. So Micah Parsons in for another very big season. But I do want to backtrack sort of a couple steps back to the quarterback, Dak Prescott. And if you ask me, he's not a quarterback that I really enjoy in terms of his skill set and what he brings and what he can do for this team. But ultimately, he's the guy that's there. He's been there for a few years now. And I do think he's capable of sort of winning this division if he can sort of tidy up a few things. Obviously, the interception were a big story last season after coming in. Cooper Rush sort of starting that season after, I think, Dak got injured in week 1, I believe. And Cooper Rush, kept it very steady. But, Prescott is his worries. It's the interceptions. And then no sort of safety blanket with Dalton Schultz is also another question. So that tight end room is opening up for someone to step up. But as I did mention in the Eagles part, I do have them finishing with the same record, 11-6. I'll reiterate, I just think they'll have the better in-division record as to why the Dallas Cowboys will be finishing on top and winning this division. But that is it for this prediction video. Let me know what you think, if I'm completely crazy and wrong for having the Eagles not finishing first. But I did explain myself. It makes sense. It's just a prediction. But if you did enjoy this video, let me know. Comment down below what your prediction is for the NFC East. And is one of these teams a Super Bowl champion next season? Who knows? But like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.